Characters are one of the integral parts of creating a good story. So let me ask you a few questions. How many of you have no trouble at all coming up with characters? How many of you plan out all your characters before you begin your story? How often do your characters take on a life of their own? After you've been writing them for a while, some characters do tend to take on a life of their own. There's a few theories for why this is, but I think it's a sign that you really know your character when this happens. You can predict what they're going to do without having to consult to a character map, or force the story to go a certain way. But how do we get to that point? Personally, I play a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, which is a role-playing game first and foremost, and so this really helps me when it comes to character creation, as there are set rules, but unlimited permutations within those rules. Before we begin talking about character development in earnest, how about you have a go at creating your own character in D&D Beyond? Another technique that I found helps me figure out my characters is hot seating. This is a technique used in acting and drama settings to get to know your character that you're going to be playing. It's also immensely useful for creating your cast of main characters, since you're likely going to be writing either from this character's perspective, or writing these characters' reactions to your main character. How it works is, you choose a character, give a short introduction, and the people around the table, or on a virtual Zoom call, ask you questions. You have to respond to these questions as your character would respond. How about you give this a go? Think about your main characters. Are they similar at all? Do you have a type that you like to write about? Why? Can you figure this out? Another good tip for creating characters is thinking about the types of groups of characters that will be able to have interesting dynamics. There's a common group of characters in many fantasy stories that you'll see all over the place if you look now. The lovable rogue, the clueless hero, and the capable expert. Throw a love interest somewhere into that group of three, and you have a really interesting and likeable set of characters in general. Think about it. In Star Wars, the main three characters fit this trope. Harry Potter too. This group trope seems to have excellent dynamics. Can you think of any other common ones? What dynamics exist in your main character groups? To create truly interesting group dynamics, think, how are the characters similar, and how are they different? Think about Harry, Ron, and Hermione from Harry Potter. Harry and Ron are more slacker types, while Hermione is a driven student. Hermione and Ron know more about the wizarding world, while Harry tends towards cluelessness, though Harry and Hermione are actually from the Muggle world, while Ron isn't. Hermione and Harry are thought of as gifted, while Ron is considered not as gifted. It's all a big Venn diagram, and it can create some really interesting dynamics if you think about all these things. So try labeling your main characters with a single title to fit their character traits, and see what you come up with. Also, think about how you can create similarities and differences between your main character cast to create friendship and friction. Another good tip is to think about your characters' backstories and have their personalities be shaped by that. So this is where some research will come into play, which should be required anyway. Looking into some physiological and psychological effects of different situations in life can be a window into creating realistic characters. There can be many big life events that can shape how they react and behave during certain situations. So, for example, if you have a character whose parents were very strict growing up, they might be a bit of a rebel now, and lack the decision-making abilities others have. Maybe because they never learned how to make decisions, since their parents made those choices for them. You can go down other routes with this, but this is just food for thought. Additionally, if you have secondary characters, or characters who get a decent amount of page time but aren't main characters, craft their personality types to be the opposite of the main character, or at least sufficiently different. Additionally, give your character a specific and unique voice. Think about some ways that your friends speak that make them stand out. Do they use certain phrases a lot? Do they have a specific laugh or verbal tick? Here are some exercises that you can do to try and flesh out your character a little more. The first one is write who you know. So I know that some of my characters are based on people that I know, or have encountered in real life, with select personality traits cranked up. Think of 3 different distinct personality traits of different people in your life, and combine them to make a character. Could this character be included in the world of your projects? You can create a single character with personality traits and tics taken from multiple people, as long as it makes sense. It can create a pretty fun and well-rounded character. The second exercise could be that your character is an eyewitness to a crime. A man has robbed a bank, but instead of keeping the money for himself, he donates it to an orphanage that can now afford to feed, clothe, and care for its children because of this donation. But you know who committed the crime. If you go to the authorities with the information, there's a good chance the money will be returned to the bank, leaving a lot of kids in need. What does your character do in this situation? The third exercise is to write a journal entry reacting to the news that war has broken out in your character's country, in the voice of your character. And the fourth exercise is to write a scene in which your character is only present through the candid descriptions of him or her by others. Here's a useful 12-step guide for good character development. And a few more tips here. Happy writing!